Hey guys, welcome to another episode of VTEC Academy. You're about to get schooled. One of the things that happens when we do our live broadcast every Tuesday evening, and by the way, you're welcome to join us, where we answer your questions live. That happens every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And we have a little live show that we answer questions on. We don't get to all of them. People who have questions that haven't been answered are encouraged to write them in the comments section below. And this video is going to be basically going over all of those questions that get posted in the comment section. At the same time, I'm going to go back onto Facebook and Instagram on the VTEC Academy Instagram and Facebook and pick up questions from there as well. And we're going to do a little bit of a follow-up. So let's get started. Anthony Solana, he asked, hello, I have a question regarding the GE8 fit with the R40 block K-swap. What intermediate shaft should be used? Can I use 8th SI axle straight up without swapping the inner joints? I will be using CRZ front knuckles with SI 8th gen hubs machined to fit in the CRZ wheel bearing. Any info would be greatly appreciated. Start off with, for those of you who don't know, the R40 block is off the K24Z engine. So, and it's basically the same as the block that you're going to find on the 2008 to 2012 Honda Accord, or 2013 Honda Accord, the 2009 to 2014 TSX, and of course the 2012 to 2015 Civic Si. That block is a little bit different. It has an oil filter on the back side of the block, and that actually prevents you from using the intermediate shaft you'd find on the RSX Type S or on the earlier model Civic Si. So he's asking what intermediate shaft should be used first of all. The intermediate shaft that should be used is the one from the TSX and the Accord. It's about 2.5 inches longer. You're going to need to make sure that you tell the company that you're buying the axles from that you have that intermediate shaft, because it's going to require a different axle than you would find with the RSX block. By the way, the K24Z is the block you want to be using, or the engine you want to be using, when you're doing a swap into the GE fit. And the reason for that is the ECU is much more compatible. If you look at the number of pins on the connector, so for instance, the ECU has 3 plugs on it. One of them is on the car's harness, and 2 of them are the engine harness. The one that's on the car's harness has 48 pins on it, and it's only the K24Z ECUs that have that same 48-pin connector. So you're going to be using the harness from your engine plus the ECU from that engine. And actually, I would probably recommend using, unless it's a 2015 fit, I would probably be using the TSX or the Accord ECU. But anyway, back to the axles. The axle joints on all the K series are basically the same. Whether or not you can use the 8th gen Civic Si axle straight up, I don't know. I doubt seriously that car is as wide as the 8th gen Civic. So there probably is some discrepancy on the length of the axles that you want to use. The other thing is I may not have, when I placed the motor in the car, I may not have placed it in the same point in the middle. So one axle may work and one axle may not work. So you're going to need to have axles that are specifically designed for that swap, most likely. Hasport makes them, and I'm sure other people can make them as well. All right, and it says I will be using the CRZ front knuckles with the SI 8th gen hubs machined to fit in the CRZ wheel bearing. So basically you're trying to get the larger outer joint that you would find on the Type S, RSX Type S, and on the Civic Si. It uses like a 36 millimeter nut. And you're going to have those machined down. Yeah, I mean, basically, you know, the axle that you're going to want to have, then you need to, again, tell whoever you're getting the axles from that you're using that larger outer joint so that they make sure that they get the right joint on the outside of the axle. But yeah, I don't see any reason why what you're doing wouldn't work. It's just a question of the axle length. Okay, so anyway, I hope it answers your questions, Anthony. If you have more questions, please go ahead and post them. I noticed you actually asked both on YouTube and on Instagram, you're welcome to ask either one of those places again, and we'll do follow-ups, okay? Next question is from Boinkize, B-O-I-N-K-I-Z-E. He says, hey, y'all, I love the show, and I have a question. Do you have an ETA on for the full set of GD fit replacement mounts? And what about just a single rear mount? I understand y'all have a lot going on right now, but my car could use some new mounts, and I'd love to have some Assport product there. You know, at some point, we'll probably get to that. Right at the moment, the only plans I have are for a steel replacement mount for the rear mount. I have a prototype. I guess I need to kind of move forward on that and get it going. New products are interesting. We have a huge list of new products. And again, this is more for Hassport than, VTEC Academy. Hassport has a huge list of products they're doing. The GD Fit seems to be a fairly popular car, so that is something that we do want to do. I might wind up coming up with some steel replacement mounts first, and then later on maybe seeing which ones we want to convert to billet. So I'll see what I can do. I hate talking about products I haven't made yet because sometimes other things come in front of it right now. I'm working on 5 different new mount kits right at the moment. That's not really true. 7 different new mount kits right at the moment. So it's a little bit crowded in my schedule. Single cams, also from YouTube, ask, can you make a vid about case swapping an 07 Civic non-SI? It's hard to find info on what needs to be bought and done. That is something I've wanted to do since 2006. I'm not currently looking for a car. If I can find a car, I will actually do the swap, and I would imagine we're probably going to wind up having to come up with probably a couple brackets in order to make that happen. I've looked at the mounts. I know what's involved. It should be a relatively quick thing to develop once I get one of those chassis. So it is something on my list. I just haven't been able to get to it yet. Again, I'm actively looking for a car right now. If I find one, we will probably get that done sooner rather than later. But at the moment, I do not have a car. All right. So, and that was speaking as Hassport. Speaking as VTEC Academy, believe me, when I do the swap, I'll cover it in a video. Travis Ventripool asks, are you guys making a low-profile shifter for the reverse shifter K20Z3 like you're making for the EF? For those who don't know, Hassport makes a low-profile shifter. I actually designed that when we were doing Project EF, and it allows you to get underneath the stock console. Again, I don't really like talking about stuff that are in development, but it is in development. So at some point, I'll have something for you. I was going back and forth for the way it works, because what winds up happening is the RSX one lent itself well to that, because the fulcrum for the shifter is on the bottom of the shift mechanism, and so the cable that selects first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, when you push it, push the shift lever, it pushes the cable. When you pull the shift lever, it pulls the cable. What happens is on the it's a little more tricky with one for the Z transmission, for the K20Z transmission, because when you pull the shifter, it pushes the cable. When you push the shifter, it pulls the cable. So it works opposite. At some point, I'm probably going to do that. I've got several of those transmissions. I need to actually develop it not only for that, but for the 20. Oh, you know what? We'll do it for the EK. We'll do it for the EK. So we have an EK project that uses actually a K24Z transmission, which again has a reversed push-pull type thing. So when I do it for that, I will at the same time go ahead and do it for the Z3 transmissions. But like I said, big list of stuff to do. So it is on the list. It is on the short list. Just not. I'm not working on it currently. All right. Ricky Sampson asked, and I believe this was from Instagram or Facebook actually. I have a question on motor mounts for the EKK2 96 to 2000 K-Series engine swap. The question is, what are the 2 holes on the motor mounts for? And he actually means the brackets. If you look at our EKK2 kit, our EGK2 kit, our EFK2 kit, they actually are all designed to have dual height mounting. And the reason that is because the difference between a K24 and a K20 is about 3/4 of an inch. It's 19 millimeters. So what we did was we made those 3 mount kits, and actually a few others, dual height. So sometimes, like on the EK, you can mount either on the top holes or the bottom holes. And sometimes on like the EG or EF, you have one mount that has two sets of hole and one mount that actually flips. That allows you to mount the engine with maximum hood clearance. So for instance, if you have a K20, you use the upper mounting position, and that puts you very close to the hood, gives you maximum ground clearance. If you have a K24, or if you're running power steering on a K20, you use the lower holes. That drops the motor down, gives you clearance to the hood for either your power steering pump or the valve cover. And that's the reason for that design. By the way, and a lot of this confuses a lot of people. On the brackets on the side, there's usually a top hole and a bottom hole. On the rear bracket, it actually mounts to the engine, not to the chassis. So what winds up happening is when you use our mount kit and you want to mount it on the high position, you use the high holes right and left. But on the back, because the bracket is on the engine and not on the chassis, you use the bottom hole. So because you're bringing the engine up, so you need to use a bottom hole in the back. And same thing stands for the EF, EK, DA, K2, and probably, and the ZFK2 and the GEK and the GKK. So all those kits have dual height capability, and it's basically to get maximum ground clearance. But the other thing it does, and I forgot about this, the real reason I did it was that you wind up with the head in the same place with both mount kits. So if you use it at the high position on a K20 and low position on a K24, the header fits the same regardless. If you buy a turbo kit that's designed for a K24 and you run it in the K20 and you lift the motor up, it fits the same. The things fit the same. It puts the intake manifold, it puts the head, exhaust ports, it puts it at the same height regardless of which engine you're using. So that's the reason it was designed like that. Dustin Adolfson says, "Hi, thanks for all your help. So I was wondering, I'm running a stock PRD JDM harness with a swap, and would the fuel pump wire be in the E1 just like on the RSX Type S harness? The colors don't match with all of the pins out I find on the internet. Sorry for all the questions. It's just my first K-swap." So the immobilizer on the Japanese ECUs, and by the way, the PRD ECU is like a Civic Type R ECU. There's also another ECU that's the Integra Type R ECU, which would be our RSX. Their immobilizer doesn't work quite the same. So it's simplified, so to speak. So basically, the only thing that's really preventing your engine from running is the E1, the wire at E1 on the ECU. The wire at E1 on the ECU is one that triggers the fuel pump relay. There's two relays on these cars, main relay and fuel pump relay. So it triggers the fuel pump relay. It looks for the chip in the key. If it sees it, it triggers it. So on a JDM ECU, you can bypass that by pulling the wire out of the connector, the E1 wire out of the connector, and putting it straight to ground. And that way, anytime you turn the key on, the fuel pump comes on. So that bypasses the immobilizer on JDM ECUs. I don't know about European ECUs, but it absolutely does not work on US ECUs. The other thing is if you accidentally just like tap into that wire and try to ground it, you will actually kill the ECU. You'll burn up something inside the ECU, a driver, and it will no longer work. So the wire has to be removed, put to ground, and then it will bypass the immobilizer. Anyway, this is what he needed to do in order to get the fuel pump to fire. So he actually had a follow-up question that he posted a couple days later. He says, "Hi, because I'd answered this question, he says, 'Hi, I got my fuel pump to prime, but I'm pretty sure I have no spark. Again, I have the PRD J02 ECU. Could I maybe need an immobilizer delete? Is the only thing the immobilizer do is make the fuel pump not run? Any help would be awesome.'" So my experience with this ECU is pretty limited. We had one back in 2002 that we had put on our EP3. We had a Type R motor with a Type R ECU. We basically grounded that one wire, fired up, everything ran perfectly. Later on down the road, we went and had that ECU. Well, we kept that ECU because it was part of it was kind of special. But we eventually had a Honda to put on there. So but our car started up fine, ran fine. So you're saying that you think you don't have any spark. You need to check and see if that's actually the problem. And if that is a problem, then there may be some other problem that's going on. So the relay, the main relay, not only gives power to the fuel pump relay, but which it obviously is. It also sends power back to the ECU to tell it to turn on. It also sends power to any of the yellow-black wires that are on your engine harness. So, which I don't believe have anything to do with spark. I believe the spark all come from black-white wires, which are triggered by probably not the main relay. Hang on. Let me look that up. I actually happen to have a manual right here. Yeah, it's getting power straight from the ignition. So basically key on, that gives your ignition coils power. So if the ignition coils aren't, you need to check the black wire's got 12 volts to it. If it is, then the next thing you need to do is look at the connection at the ECU and see if your crank angle sensor is working properly. Because basically the crank angle sensor is what tells the computer when to fire. It keeps track of the spinning motor, and it will actually trigger the engine firing. So that's, it's tough to diagnose the stuff over a YouTube video, but you need to check and see if there's power to that particular black wire. It should, anytime it keys on, it should have 12 volts. If it does, then the problem is something related to the computer. The computer may be turning off again, or you may have a problem with the which would be a wiring problem, or you may have another problem with maybe the crank angle sensor. So check that out. And sometimes you crank the engine long enough, eventually you get a check engine light, and you need to read that code and see what it says. Hopefully you've also added in a data link connector into your wiring so that you can do that. Detailer X, he writes, "Hey VTEC Academy, I have a stock 2000 Integra GSR and would like to add an OEM LSD. Would you be able to confirm if a particular LSD for sale would be a direct fit into my DC2? And do I need to get any else to support this edition? Thank you for your help." He actually sent a couple photos of the LSD, and honestly, the only thing I can go off is the advertisement itself. Make sure you protect yourself by using PayPal and pay the percentage so that you have recourse if it turns out not to be the correct one. So as far as I can see, it looks like the correct LSD, so you should be fine. But again, make sure you use the protections of PayPal so that if there's something wrong, you have recourse. It could be broken. You never know. As far as what else you need, it depends on what shape the bearings are in. If the bearings are in good shape, you can probably get away with the bearings that are on the LSD. I believe I saw bearings on the LSD already. The other thing, but you can also use your stock differential bearings if they're okay. You can get a bearing splitter and pull it off and get those off and reuse them. And then, yeah, it looks like it's fine. Okie dokie. FYAH works. There may be a way to pronounce that, but I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, it says, I know it comes, he says, I want to buy a first-gen CR-V, 2000 or 2001. I know it comes with a B20 engine, which is non-VTEC. In the future, after I get the car, I'm considering 2 engine swaps, either a B18C, which would be VTEC, or one of the H22 engines that came in the Prelude. I don't intend to race or turbo or modify the engine, just a daily driver. I want a 5-speed tranny with the engine and keep the all-wheel drive. Can it work? Is it worth it? Can a 5-speed tranny be hooked up with the current B20 engine? Look forward to your advice. Yeah, so you can actually absolutely do it. I mean, the H22, if you wanted to do something like that, you would wind up actually doing like an H2B conversion, because the B series all-wheel drive transmission has the same bolt pattern as all the B series transmissions. So with an H2B conversion, you would be able to do that. And the engine bay is much bigger on a CR-V, so that actually conversion would work better in that car. Now, the engine mount, unless somebody has something specifically for the CR-V, you may wind up having to make some modifications to the bracket they send you for that, because what winds up happening is on a CR-V, because the car's kind of taller, the subframe is farther away from where the mounts are on the left and right side. So you wind up with kind of adjusted right hand and left hand mounts on that thing. You might be able to use Hasport's replacement mount for the left-hand side because it's actually got a shorter bracket. So if you did that, it might just bolt right in and work fine, which would be kind of cool. In fact, I don't see why it wouldn't. But at worst, you might have to add a couple spacers underneath the mount in order to get it to the right height for that. Again, on a CRV, the subframe is lower compared to the frame rails than it is on an EK. So although that wasn't specifically designed for that engine swap, I think you might be able to get away with it if you use Hasport's. It's called an RD1 left-hand mount. There's a bracket and 2-bolt mount. I'm thinking you should be able to use that. And then you want to make sure that you use the block bracket that came with the... see, there's a problem. They may wind up only having a 3-bolt block bracket on the popular H2B kits. So anyway, it may require a little bit of finagling to get it to work. All right, so let's go to your other choice, which would be a B18C. Yeah, the B18C would be fine. You could just bolt that right in there using the block bracket from your original CRV engine, and it would bolt right up to the transmission. The B-Series transmission you want to use, once again, would be the B-Series manual transmission from the CRV because that's the only one that is set up to be all-wheel drive. But there's no reason that wouldn't work, and that would be kind of cool. So the other option that you may not be thinking about is simply getting a fresher B20, depending on how much this mileage this one has, and maybe just bolting a VTEC head on it. It's going to be a lower revving engine, but it'll have more torque, which will help that car out. And the B20 head will give you 30 or more horsepower because of the way it's set up. And you can buy cams for it. There's a lot of aftermarket support for that, so it would be easier to modify. But you could do that with keeping your B20 bottom end, or maybe a fresher B20 bottom end, like one of the Japanese high compression ones you can buy for $400 or $500, and then putting the VTEC head on that. That might wind up being a better choice in the end. It might wind up being actually less expensive too. So that's what I would probably look at if I was doing that. At some point, I need to do both K and J swap mounts for that car because I think that would be kind of cool. I think I've noticed a real interest in doing stuff with CRVs. In fact, I've got a friend who had a company that did a lot of expedition type stuff for the Nissan Xterra and stuff like that, and he's thinking about doing it for the CRV because of the popularity of it. I think it'd be really cool. I think it'd be a nice project. DJ CeeLo says, I just saw your reverse lockout quick tip video on VTEC Academy. It says, so I have a K20A2 motor, wondering if I can use the K20A3 engine harness. I will be using a CRV all-wheel drive 25-speed. What modification would I need to make it work? Well, the K23A3 is basically the base RSX harness or the EP3 harness. Yeah, really, no modifications. The A2 motor, if you're using the A3 one from the EP3, it just goes straight on, and it'll be fine. Your CRV all-wheel drive 5-speed tranny has a vehicle speed sensor in the back, so it's all good. You could just make it all plug right in, and it would all work fine. You would just need to make sure that you had an ECU that could it was tunable for your K20A2. If your K20A3 engine harness was from the base model RSX, there would probably be a few modifications you have to do, basically for moving stuff around to make sure it reached. I don't recall exactly, but it's possible. Actually, I can look it up again. Let's look it up. I believe it's possible that the throttle position sensor may actually be, the throttle position sensor needs to be altered slightly because of the way it works. So, for instance, if you had a base RSX harness, which is K20A3 base RSX harness, and you're using the RSX Type S engine, you need to take the wires that are at 1 and 3, which are the 2 outside wires, and you need to flop them. If you do that, then that harness will work fine for that. So that would be the modification you would need to do if your particular harness was actually from the base RSX. Anyway, that is our follow-up questions for this time around. If you want to ask your questions live, please come join us on Tuesday evenings for VTEC Academy's Midnight Oil, again at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The other option, of course, is in the comments below. Ask your question. And next Thursday, I will answer your questions on video. Thanks for joining me.